Hi, I'm Matt Hernandez, and this is Book Chat with You. In this and almost every episode, I look at short stories and I want to have a conversation with you, about short stories. I think it's imperative and it's a very important thing for our lives. So, this is another story. I've been waiting a few days to make a video, a podcast, and since I made one yesterday, I'm kind of busy with studies, but hey, let's make another one. So, it's out of this one again, San Francisco Chronicles, San Francisco thrillers. And this is a collection of, detective noir stories. Today we're looking at The Second Coming by Joe Gores. So I guess his style was trying to mimic the Hammett, and we looked at a previous story of his, and I guess some people think he succeeded. That's all I kind of got because I didn't do an extensive amount of research for this. I researched just enough to see if I could find a PDF online of the story. I did. I won't post a link because it's not a university website, so I don't know about posting a link. I did see a YouTube reading of it. I will post that below. So this story, The Second Coming, there's kind of two characters in it. The two central characters, an unnamed narrator and his friend Victor. And his friend Victor wants to do things for kicks. Now, a lot of the slang is a bit antiquated. I mean, both of the two main characters, they keep calling each other dad, which kind of threw me off and stuff. But I mean, I think we still know what it means to do something for kicks, right? I think that somehow that slang has still stuck with us even till now. And they're kind of just drinking and hanging out as two pals do. And then Victor, he says, I've never seen anybody executed, and it's supposed to be for kicks. So a little bit of time passes, not much happens, and then they get a letter back saying that they can go view this execution. And some people say they don't learn from fiction. Well, you kind of learn how San Francisco used to do their executions back in the day. I wouldn't have known any of this. I wouldn't know how much of any execution would be done, but you do see a little bit of those details here. But then this truly shocks our two main characters, especially Victor. He was quite ecstatic to go, quite a bit of adrenaline. Then, after the event, it shakes him as a person. And it's through that we can see how traumatic watching an execution would be on somebody and the long lasting effects it would have on us, you know? And I think that I should go and start using some parts of the text, but that's really a summary of the whole story. But I'll start to go through some of the text and go over the detail. I used an excessive use of highlighter here. I don't know when I'll ever put these up as a video again, whenever I can make time and have a computer that's, I don't know. Is it that my computer's slow, or is it just that Windows 7 uses up too many resources? So I'm going to go through some of this. I'm going to show basically the first and last page, basically, that I'm going to look at and show it here on the screen whenever I eventually edit this together for video. So it says, man, he said, I have made every scene in the world. I have balled all the chicks, red and yellow and black and white. I got high on muggles, blue jays, redbirds, and mescaline. I have even tried the white stuff a time or two, but you're a goddamn tiger, Dad. But there's one kick I've never had, man. When he didn't go on, I rolled my head off the quartz gin bottle I was using for a pillow and looked at him. He was giving me a shot with one of those hot, wild eyes of his. So, what is it? I've never watched an execution. So, I mean, what is that? You do this for kicks, for entertainment, to look at an execution of all things? I don't know. What's going on with somebody's life that you're chasing kicks, and then somehow this just pops in your mind? This would be one of those thoughts that I could imagine if I was to say it. My wife would ask me, what made you think of that? And I'd say, I don't know. And then she'd pry for 10 more minutes. What made you think of that? I just kept saying, I don't know. And I bet that it was as spontaneous of a thing as this. So it says, so I went ahead and wrote the letter because even sober, it still seemed like a cool idea for some kicks. So I guess at this time, sometimes you had to write a letter, at least as the story goes. You had to write a letter to the warden and ask permission to go. They want to make sure they have enough people to watch, so they need people to watch, but they also want to make sure that you're not going to do anything silly also. Okay, so On the next page, another quote from here. Victor felt it too, for he turned to me and said, "Must maintain cool, Dad." And it's like, it's like you're telling somebody else to remain cool when you yourself are losing your own cool, right? And so the next one, but Victor was in Kicksville, like desperate to put on all those squares in the black suits. When they looked over at us, he jumped up on the back bucket seat and spread his arms wide like the Sermon on the Mount. So, I mean, he's making some silly gestures, and I don't think he's trying to make a joke of the whole thing. That's how it's coming off, you know? Like another example, not extremely far removed from this, but it's like somebody just passed away, and within the next few days or something, somebody makes an awkward smile or laugh. And every now and then, it's just a very nervous kind of tension kind of a thing. Okay, next page. A guard came in and told us to surrender everything in our pockets and get a receipt for it. We had to remove our shoes too. They were too heavy for the fluoroscope. I like this. We're kind of being taught a bit of what this situation looks like. Oh, I'd even say what the individual's being executed for. Okay, so the next one. The army stud was at parade rest with a face so pale his freckles looked like a charge of shot. He had reddish hair. So the person being charged in the story and sentenced to execution, he did something very bad to an army lieutenant's wife, which led to her death. And okay, it says, don't you remember? Yeah, soldier's wife. He was raping her, and they turned in unison toward the army lieutenant. So Victor kind of just blurts this out about the soldier's wife. And I mean, we don't know these characters too well, but we imagine in a better setting, he would have slightly better composure than this. Okay, the next page, page 86. And this would have been a good contestant to show on the screen because, I mean, it kind of teaches us a little bit about how this process went or goes. Inside the chamber, there were these two massive chairs, probably oak, facing the rear walls side by side. Their backs were high enough to come to the nape of the neck of anyone sitting in them. Under each of them, like a bucket that I knew contained hydrochloric acid. It continues on. A little educational, frankly. Okay, next page. Now, when they mentioned the army lieutenant in parade rest, was that the author saying that? Is that the character? I mean, so the story was published in 1966. I get a feeling these characters are probably a tiny bit too young to have been in World War II. I kind of feel like this comes from the author along with this next one. Then I realized I was thinking of him in the past tense. So instead of he says, he thinks, he was, he did. I don't know. Okay. And then it says here, Victor was sweating profusely, his eyes glued to the window. Yeah, so the person's going to be gassed until he expires. And Victor, and there's this thick glass between them because we can imagine with gas, and it says Victor's eyes glued to the window. Okay, on the next page, I like this quote, and while taking these notes, I really took note of this. We've created this society that we're all responsible for what it does, but none of us as individuals is willing to take that responsibility. Isn't that kind of interesting? And I mean, I do feel that this is the character. The author might be coming through the character, and maybe the author had this thought and he wanted to insert this into one of his stories, but I do believe this is quite true. So we're responsible for society, but none of us take that responsibility. It's the same thing. Like I've learned in my own life, like there's a difference between blame and responsibility, and we have to take responsibility even if we don't have full blame. I don't know. I wish I can go on more with this quote. It's a good quote. Okay, and the next one. But then he did it again. Just nerves, like the fish twitching after you whack it on the skull in the back of the edge of the skinny knife. So after the person, he expires, the person being executed, there are a few moments that it looks like he's breathing. There's no more breath to be had. He's gone. But there are moments his body sort of does this convulsing that it looks like there's breath. And it seems like the characters, they get that a second later. And then we kind of get that whenever they kind of get that. And, maybe if somebody read the story in 1966 or something like that, maybe they would have gotten it a bit more instantly. Okay, so on the next page, Victor took a deep, shuddering breath as if he could never get enough air. Then he said in a barely audible voice, "How did you dig that action, man?" So it was a bit too intense for them. So after this, he kind of drives a bit crazy on the freeway. They get pulled over by the police. The police ask them both questions. The narrator just says nothing. They hit Victor in the back of the head. He can't drive for a year. Then a bit later, it says in the story, "I cannot wear shoes." He moved closer and glanced up and down the street and said with tragic earnestness, "I can only hear with the soles of my feet, man." Then he nodded and padded away through the crowds on silent, naked soles like a puzzled panther, drifting through the fruiters and drunken teenagers and fuzz trying to bust some cap for possession who have inherited North Beach from the true swingers. I guess all Victor wants to listen to now is Mother Earth. All he wants to hear is the comforting sound of the worms chewing away. So we kind of learn how traumatic an experience like watching this could be from their experience, not by being described what an execution is, but sort of living through it, watching them, especially Victor. And in a small sense, I mean, I don't want to go into my own details, feelings too strongly, but in a sense, it's a little bit of an argument against the death penalty and such. Some people might have done some horrible things. And if there was 100 political issues, I don't know how far up top that would be for me for reform. But, you have to think about not what it does to somebody who's done horrible things, but what does it do to us? What does it do to us to do it, to witness it, to okay it, And that is something that we ought to give a pause and think about as well. And I did like this story. I did, and I'd love to hear what you think. And yeah, have a wonderful day. Bye.